doctor's appointment. This meeting of the City of Lincoln, Lancaster County Railroad Transportation Safety District, commonly referred to as the RTSD, is subject to and adheres to the Nebraska Open Meetings Act. A copy of the Nebraska Open Meetings Act is available for inspection and is posted by the entrance to this room. The RTSD agenda and all the materials that are considered at today's meeting were posted on the RTSD website on June 1st, 2021. The RTSD website is also accessible by links from both the City of Lincoln and Lancaster County official government sites. In addition, the meeting agenda is posted on the bulletin board located in City Hall, first floor, 555 South 10th Street. A copy of the agenda is also available at the entrance to this room. One copy of the meeting agenda and all the materials being considered today are located at the dais, and complete copies of these materials are on file at the RTSD office at 949 West Bond Street, Suite 200. Very good. I think that covers 1 and 2. We'll move on to item number 3, which is the approval of minutes from the last meeting.
President Vest, before you take that, Mr. Beckius, you indicated prior to the meeting that your appointment has not been finalized yet for this. Okay, so before we take action on any matters, I think we're waiting for one more person. Roma's going to attend, I believe.
Well, we think so.
Okay.
So do we need,
We need a quorum. We want
is a quorum
meeting.
for?
Mm-hmm.
Aha, okay.
Okay.
Wait, so you're saying that we
Could we
don't
table
have a
this and go
quorum?
on to other items that
Yes.
don't
Other
items on the
require?
agenda.
I recommend that we table any action items and start with maybe some reports or other items.
Well, we have a lot of action items to table there. Let's see, that would take out item 4. That would, okay, item number 5, report of statement of financial activity. Dennis Myers. The talented and eloquent Mr. Myers is joining us this morning.
Yes, good morning. Dennis Meyer. I am subbing for Ron Rohde this morning. Ron decided to have a wedding this weekend for his daughter down in Oklahoma City. So it is me today. So let's just kind of talk about the financial activity that was sent out. The fiscal year end closes June 30th. The financial report was as of 5/21. So 521's pretty close to about 89% of the fiscal year. So when you take a look at the receipts for the RTSD, you will see that the total is just a little less than $4.5 million, which just is right at about the 88% number. So revenues, pretty much kind of spot on as we go to close out the fiscal year. So on the disbursement side, you will see that the disbursements is a little over $1 million. That is at a 17% number there. So when we look at the cash and investments, you will see that total fund balance as of May 21st was at about 14.4 million. About 13.6 of that is sitting in some type of investment, whether it's a money market, whether it's a CD. You've got 13.6 of it invested. So at this point in time, as of 5/21, that's where the RTSD is sitting.
Okay. So, and the 13 million, go ahead, Jane, you go first and then I'll follow up.
So concerning the disbursements, it seems like we're lagging a bit here, and I'm guessing it's construction billing hasn't been received, or?
Well, and I think some of it is just the activity that is going on right now. I mean, at this point in time, if you kind of see on the investment side, where in 18 the total fund balance was at 16.4, then it was at 11.3, 10.8, and now it's kind of building up. You know, you kind of had the big payment that happened there, and now you've really got a big project that you're really trying to put money aside for, and I believe that's what's happening.
So will this nest egg carry over to our next fiscal year?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
And I do think we've discussed this probably when Ron was here, Dennis, but these discussions have been taking place about the need to accumulate some funds as we grow closer to construction dates for the 33rd and Adams Street project.
Right. I mean, your levy is only going to generate so much. So if you're not setting some funds aside when those bills and payments come due, you won't have the money sitting there. So it's you're just kind of in that process of trying to get to that point.
Yeah, yeah. And it's well known, it's been well discussed that these last 2 years, the levy for the RTSD has been set at a lower rate. And the board has signaled its intention to raise it back up to the previous rate.
Right.
That's been discussed at these meetings pretty thoroughly, so I think we're all on the same page there. Deb?
A comment and a question. And even though construction on that large project is years away, as I'm sure we'll hear from Chris later on, right-of-way acquisition will be happening much sooner. And so those funds need to be there. And it's a small amount, but the investment interest income, we were expecting 60,000 and are, way over that. With interest rates low, it's just more money in.
Yeah, I think on some of that, sometimes projecting out interest income, especially when your balance has been climbing quite a bit fairly quickly, that interest has just kind of, for the most part, all that I would say is that 60,000 was probably a low-ended number. And so now, again, that's just going into your fund balance to kind of help you when you get to that project.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you guys ask Ron this many questions? I feel like you guys are trying to put the pressure on
We've
me,
been
so.
saving up. He said I got a wedding coming
Ron
up.
said, "Oh, it's easy," and so now you guys are.
Yeah. Well, gosh, now I feel guilty here, so I'll just say.
No, I mean, come on, just keep bringing it. I'm fine. I'm fine.
We haven't stepped, in 2.5 years, I haven't seen you stepped yet, Dennis. So today will not be the exception. Any other questions for Mr. Meyer? Thank you for your
Okay.
time, sir.
You bet.
And do we need to, Roger, I can't remember, do we typically vote on the reports?
Actually, in the past, you've accepted a motion to accept the
Oh,
financial
geez.
report.
So it
Okay.
did go into an action item as opposed to a non.
Well, that's because I told you only the ones that said consideration were action.
You thought I wasn't
I meant-
listening,
I-
Roger, but here I was. Okay.
Okay.
Well, then I guess,
We
let's
can-
just get on the table here. Can we approve this with Tom here, or is this? Do we need a motion to approve Tom for purposes of doing business today?
Prior, again, Bill Cudel at Crosby Gunzel Law Firm. Mr. Beckius indicated prior to the hearing that he has not yet been formally approved and appointed by
The city council.
his governing body
Yeah.
to be here today. So I think for purposes of our meeting, he is not counted as a qualified member.
We do that today.
Later today.
Yeah, at
Okay.
3 PM.
So we're waiting on a quorum from one other.
Okay,
Okay.
I know you're an attorney, but what about if we vote today pending approval of Tom, contingent upon Tom being approved later this afternoon?
Either that or
No.
we'll just have the presentation
Usually-
and next time we'll approve to accept both financial.
We need to have a quorum in order to have a valid meeting. We're going to need that fourth to have that quorum in order to have that action item. So unfortunately, I think we're going to have to wait for one more in order to complete this.
Now,
as a
usually
valid,
Durbin's
enforceable
tongue
meeting.
is
Yeah, yeah,
bleeding
I
by
did.
this
Yeah.
point, and so
Durbin's on the move.
I did text Roma.
I did too. If we had somebody here from our office, we would have them call.
Agreed.
Nobody, I came in at 9:30 and the only.
My understanding is it is not possible for her to be here due to a family.
Well, and James
circumstance.
Michael's out and.
Can I try James and see if there's any way? Let me,
I feel free. I don't know the entirety of his schedule, certainly.
Well, we love meetings, so we can always come back.
We could.
Meetings are us. That's what we do.
We have a lot of people with busy schedules sitting here that I hate to burden.
Right. If we can dispatch with some of the reports and then call another meeting, special meeting for action items.
Do you think we could move on down to item 11?
We'll
Yeah.
clarify.
We can, yeah, I think Tom's idea is a good one, just to discuss.
Yep.
Yeah, certainly all the others look like they're going to, unless 6, but I think 6 probably requires a motion too, so
7, 8.
I know all the ones with consideration we have to vote on.
So we'll just jump right to Chris.
All right.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I am the project manager for the 33rd and Cornhusker project, and I don't have anything earth-shattering for you. The RTSD is currently reviewing the plan set that was submitted by Olson, who's the consultant that we hired to do the project, and then that will be followed up by submittal of the NEPA document. Like we talked about last time, we're still on schedule to have a public hearing in early 2023, and that will be followed by, early 2022, and that will be followed by just a review and approvals of the NEPA document, and then after that, final design will wrap up, and like Deb was talking about, that will be followed by right-of-way acquisition, most likely in 2024, 25, and then construction starting in 2026. We are coordinating with the Dead Man's Run project, and we've discussed that before. That project is on a track to have construction started before the 33rd and Cornhusker project, so that means there are some overlapping right-of-way tracks from the Dead Man's Run project and the RTSD project. So when we do get to that right-of-way acquisition phase, there may be some parcels, again, going back to making the best use of taxpayer dollars, regardless of what type of dollar that is, and there might be some benefits for early acquisition if we get approval from various agencies to coordinate those two projects together and acquire what we need potentially for the 33rd and Cornhusker project. So we'll be taking a look at that for early acquisitions. In terms of the 33rd and Cornhusker project, it'd be on the same schedule as the Dead Man's Run project, but we're not quite to that point to make that decision yet, but that's something that we'll be looking at just to make, be efficient with our funding needs. So with that, I'm open to any questions.
Yeah, go ahead, Jane.
Chris, could you tell us again, the public hearing, or is it going to be an open house in 2022, or both, or?
This will be a formal public hearing, so it's a little bit more formal than an open house. So open houses, we typically have people coming and going. This will be a formal presentation. Everything will be documented, and, questions or items that are brought up in the public hearing will be officially recorded and addressed in the environmental document.
And then, are we planning on having another open house to get interested parties and people in the community updated on where this project is at? I know you've periodically have.
Yeah, unfortunately, we were scheduled to have an open house last year, but because of COVID, we weren't able to have that. So we had a website update. We recently just had another website update. There hasn't been anything, again, major that's changed. I think we talked about last time the 44th Street crossing. We've made the decision that will stay open to vehicles. We'll make some modifications to the pedestrian crossing there to make it ADA compatible. But outside of that, the core of the project's pretty much stayed the same. So we weren't planning on having another public open house. We did just have a website update within the last month or so. So the revised plans, everything that is on the website currently, and then we're just going through reviews for the remainder of this year, and then we'll have the public hearing early next year. It hasn't been scheduled yet.
So has there been any community outreach to some of the neighborhood associations that are in this area saying, hey, check out the new updates on the website, so that they can talk about them in their monthly meetings?
We have a Twitter feed, and we have a Facebook page, and we have an email list. And when the website gets update, we do kind of blast emails to all the social media that we have. And then anybody that's subscribed to that would receive that notice. And I'd have to check with Olson to see how many people are described, but I think it's a pretty significant number.
And I know that they have the Mayor's Roundtable. It's usually on the first Monday of the month. And so that could just be an item,
Yeah.
like, hey, because that's when all the neighborhood association representatives are there to get updates and just say, hey, check out the.
Yeah, that'd
If
be a
they're
good
not-
topic for discussion on,
Yeah.
for that group.
Okay. I'll let Win know. I think Win normally,
Okay,
Is in charge of that.
I can contact Win and get on the agenda at some point.
Good. Any other questions? Well,
Thank you.
We're continuing forward. Lots to do.
I've talked to James Michael, and he is going to try to get here, so if we would continue with those items that we can. So I was going to suggest perhaps we go ahead and do the Southeast Lincoln Quiet Zone update. Mark Messenger from FHU is here to do that. He can give us an update, so.
Roger, are we going to get a copy of the study? Was that already provided to
The
us?
study isn't completed.
Oh.
We'll get into that. There's a number of details and issues, so with that, Mark,
Okay.
please introduce yourself.
I'm Mark Meisinger, Felsberg, Holt, and Oliveg. As Roger mentioned, we're working on the Southeast Lincoln Quiet Zone study for the RTSD. Asked that we give an update, and I have, I think, about 20 slides here. I put together some things here at the beginning, not knowing, I know there were some new board members, so I'd kind of go through just a little bit of just very basic information. If you want me to go faster, let me know if you already know all this. So basically the quiet zone is, a way to have a rail line that the locomotives don't have to sound their train horns routinely. And the way that we do that is by implementing what's called a supplementary safety measure at each of the crossings. And that was enacted as part of the final rule in 2005 by the federal government. Basically what it says is that the locomotive engineer has to sound the train horn at each crossing, public crossings. You don't have to sound the train horn at private crossings. There are 2 private crossings in this study area. And if, anytime that there's something on the tracks or the locomotive engineer feels like there's a reason to sound the horn, they can still do that. So basically what that does is it enables communities like Lincoln and Lancaster County to put in quiet zones so you don't have to sound the horn anymore. Some of the requirements, just very basically, the minimum length of a quiet zone is about a half mile along the railroad, as the railroad runs. They have to have gate arms, lights, and bells, and something called constant warning time circuitry. That's basically a circuit from the gate arm to the bungalow that anytime the train comes through, that the amount of time that the gate is down is constant, rather than, if the train comes in slow, your gate arm might go down and be down for a long time. And also these advanced warning signs, so it says no train horn. If you want me to go a little bit faster, I can, if you already know all
You're
this
fine.
information. Okay, get through this? Okay. So basically, if you don't know, it's supplementary safety measures. I've got some pictures here from Hickman, a project that we did a few years ago. So on the left is a picture of a raised median. On the right is what's called 4 quadrant gates. For the most part, those are generally what's used to implement quiet zones. Closures is another common thing to implement. And actually the railroad will pay a little bit of money if you decide to close a crossing. So there's some different things with the medians. I just wanted to point out the medians have to be at least 60 feet and desirable 100 feet from the gate arm. And they do require a 6-inch minimum, 8-inch desirable vertical curb on the approach side of the median. I was talking with Roger, if the speed limit is above 45, they want to relax that because they don't want to have an impediment for vehicles to hit. But anything below 45, the railroad's looking for that 8-inch vertical curb.
And then how far set back from the actual tracks must it be, the median?
Well, the gate arm has to be a minimum of, I believe it's 10 feet back.
Feet set back on
Yeah.
both sides.
Yes.
And the median can be flush with that arm, or it has to be further set back from the arm? Well, the idea is probably to prevent a vehicle from
Yes.
trying
Turning
to
around.
get around the arm.
Yeah, generally it's about 10 feet. Most of the time we see the gate arm set a little bit farther back than that. That's actually pretty close to the rail if you're out there and you are in that position. But usually you've got, a few feet of median and then the gate arm, and then you're, back from there is a stop bar or something.
Got it.
There's also something called a wayside horn. Basically what it is a horn that's mounted on a pole at the crossing, and it's directed right at where a vehicle would be sitting if they're, in position behind the gate arm. That is considered a 1-to-1 substitute for the train horn. So if there's a wayside horn, you don't have to sound the train horn at the crossing. Here's a picture of a noise footprint from that. One of the things that Roger asked us to do on this project is to put these at all 14 of the crossings that we're evaluating, and kind of get an idea for how many homes are impacted. The one on the left is just the train horn as it sounded as it goes through, and on the right is the noise footprint for the wayside horn. So we'll be putting that into GIS, and we'll be able to see all of them together and where they overlap, and the area that can be silenced, if you will, if you decide to put in a wayside horn.
And just to make sure I'm clear on this, the wayside horn is in addition to the other requirements? It's not an either or, it's all of them together?
Well, you have to have gates, arms, and bells, and you have to have constant warning time.
Have to have medians.
You do not have to have medians for a wayside horn.
Well, wait, okay, before you can put in a wayside horn, you have to have
Gates, arms, and bells,
gates, arms, and
and
bells.
constant warning time.
Okay.
So like sometimes we would come to a situation where we don't have 60 feet, maybe we have 40 feet to a driveway or something. And so in that case, you know, wayside horn might be a good substitute for the medians. It's much less expensive than a 4-quadrant gate, which is why we kind of look at that sometimes.
So it would allow the trains to go through without blowing their horn. There'd still be a horn, but from your map here, it has much less of an impact. on
Correct.
surrounding area.
Yes.
Okay.
And then when is the wayside horn triggered? At what point must the train be at a distance?
Well, it's similar to the constant warning time. So if the train is coming faster, the wayside horn comes on earlier.
Okay.
Yeah, I think
Distance is
it's
greater.
Yes, the
Yeah.
distance away that would sound would be greater.
Sure.
I think they're trying to give us it 15 seconds, I believe. So like if the gate arm comes down,
Amount of time as the locomotive horn, it's just mounted instead of.
Got it. So it blasts the same amount, except obviously it's more restricted in what it penetrates.
yeah, 15 seconds might be a little bit short.
Okay.
I could look that up and get back to you, but I'm
So it's not constantly blasting those people waiting.
correct. Yeah.
Yep, okay.
Yeah, it's basically, it's as if the locomotive horn is blowing, it's that same period of time. We have it up on, well, the project that Chris was just talking about up there on Cornhusker in a couple spots.
Wait, say that again. We do have wayside horns at the 33rd and Cornhusker project, or currently?
35th, yeah, for 35th and
Oh,
Adams has a
okay.
horn.
Okay.
So if you go out there, you can see there's this
Mm-hmm.
X on top of a pole out there. That's the wayside horn installation.
Okay.
So if you were to go out there, you could see that equipment out at 35th and Adams.
35th and Adams.
And this might be a little bit hard to see, but this is our study area. As I mentioned, there's 14 crossings. This shows the 12 that are public, and then there's 2 private crossings out there. At the private crossings, you don't necessarily have to have improvements to implement the quiet zone, because the locomotive is not required to sound its horn at a private crossing. So we go from Calvert Street kind of on the northwest to Yankee Hill on the southeast. And then this is just a table that has some information on each of those crossings. I won't necessarily go into detail on all of these. The one thing I did want to point out, though, is under the detection column. So as I mentioned, you're required to have constant warning time to implement a quiet zone. And only, at least according to the FRA database, only 2 of the crossings have that today. We have heard some information that when there were some upgrades on some of these crossings that constant warning time may have been installed. It's not currently shown in the database, so one thing that we would do is there's going to be what's called a diagnostic meeting with BNSF, that representatives from BNSF and the city and the state and ourselves will go out there, and we'll be able to get that information if they have constant warning time or not, officially.
Is that a cost that is typically borne by the railroad companies themselves?
Well, it is if there's not a quiet zone project like this being contemplated. If they are aware of it, they try to put the cost usually on the road authority. The latest number that we had is about $80,000 to install constant warning time. That seems to change kind of on a daily basis. It might be more than that if the railroad comes back and says we need to do it. But if you can imagine, you've got 10 crossings that would need it, that would be about $800,000.
So only 2 of the 12 currently have per the
At least
records
according
that you
to the
have.
database, yes.
And does BNSF give us the updated records, or who gets?
Well, when we're out there for the diagnostic meeting, we would ask them to get into their bungalow, into the cabinet on site and check and verify. The reason we have the diagnostic meeting is it's a way to, bring all these officials together. They look at the crossings, they see what we're proposing, and then give their input and feedback. And they can, put things on the record that say, yes, it has constant warning time, or no, it does not, or we'd like you to do something different with pedestrian crossings, those types of things. So we would, and I'll go through each of the crossings here briefly, but you could go in and propose a certain improvement, and then they would give you some details on what they think would need to be done to make that, as safe as possible from the FRA and the railroad standpoint.
Okay.
So it's really kind of a partnership and make sure everybody's on the same page up front before we get into design, and then you have, something come up later if you were to go forward with the quiet zone. So I'll go through each one of these, and I'll just kind of go very briefly. I know that we've given you these in your packet. I think what I'll do is I'll just touch on a couple that I think might be a little bit difficult, more costly or more time consuming, and then we can discuss some of that if you have questions. So the first one is the Calvert Street crossing. This is adjacent to AGP, the grain elevator. Basically, the only people that use it are the grain elevator operators and employees, and then trucks coming in and out to deliver grain there. On each of these slides on the bottom is the information from the railroad database, the FRA database. Some of these we know that this data is a little bit old, so we'll be updating these, but I just wanted to show you what was in the database. So basically on this, our idea was that we would either convert this to a private crossing or have some sort of wayside horn system, are the two probably most likely candidates for this crossing. With the number of tracks there, I believe there's 5 tracks. We don't have a lot of room to put in medians, and these 4-quadrant gates are very expensive. They're like $1 million each. So that's probably the least likely candidate that we would go with on any of these crossings.
And this crossing is currently not a private one.
Correct, it's a public crossing.
Mm-hmm.
But really, the grain elevator is the only one that uses it. So if we could, work out a deal with them to make it a private crossing, then they wouldn't have to put any improvements here theoretically. Pioneers Boulevard is the next one to the south. This one is right adjacent to Highway 2. We think that we could put raised medians here with some minor modifications. As I mentioned, you have to have a 6 to 8 inch barrier curb on the median, at least on the approach side, so the vehicle can't jump the curb and drive around the gates theoretically. As I mentioned, it's right adjacent to Highway 2, so there would be some coordination needed with the state, presumably, on this project. And we want to make sure that if there's the need for some advanced signalization, that's provided. There's really nothing out there today that's in advance. So there's not much room between the highway and the railroad crossing. So if you can imagine if you get a grain truck or something there's not enough room for that to store between the highway and the crossing.
But both of these crossings aren't really near a lot of residential population.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, this is more of an industrial type area.
Mm-hmm.
Well, unless you count the state penitentiary, but I don't know if that's considered residential. 14th Street. This one, there are raised medians out there today. We think that we could get the 60-foot minimum distance that we need if we did some modifications to some of the gate arms. So I think that one could be fairly straightforward. Southwood Drive, this is where the pickleball courts are.
Rick knows where that is.
Yeah, Rick mentioned that he
I would have been there today, but for.
So we think on this one, the either 4-quadrant gates or a wayside horn are probably the most viable candidates.
And again, the 4 quadrants are $1 million each.
Well, if you drop it in there, that's $1 million.
Set of 4.
Yes, the set,
Or,
yes.
yeah, okay,
That's about how much it was in Hickman,
okay.
and that was in 2015, so it's probably a little bit more now. There's not enough distance to get a raised median in there without having some sort of closure of a driveway. There's some driveways that are very close to the crossing.
Union Bank.
Yeah. So that's why we're saying either wayside horn or 4-quadrant gates, they're likely. 27th Street's it's really pretty much set up, other than some minor modifications to the curb. 33rd Court, this is over by the grocery store. This is a private crossing, so it's exempt. And really, it's just an access road, I believe, to the park back there. There's really no traffic there. 40th Street, again, we believe that we can get the distance required for a raised median here. So that's the most likely candidate that we're identifying. 48th Street, again, this is one that there's not quite enough room for the raised medians. So either a wayside horn or possibly 4-quadrant gates would be likely our recommendation. Now, I wouldn't say that we're making any recommendations today. This is all still subject to the diagnostic meetings and working with BNSF. So this is just kind of our initial take on these. The Nebco crossing to the ready mix plant, again, it's private. There is quite a bit of truck traffic there, so when we meet with this diagnostic review team, I would expect there may be some things that they want us to look at there, but I don't think they would require anything.
So currently, because 33rd, Nebco, they're private, the horns aren't blasting there.
Correct.
Okay. And Calvert, if we can convert it to private, then they wouldn't be blasting there.
Correct.
Okay.
56 and Old Cheney. When you go out there and look, it looks like there's a lot. It would be very complicated, but really there's raised medians, excuse me, on all of the approaches, and they run back 100 feet. So this one is actually pretty straightforward. It looks difficult because it goes through an intersection, but just by the letter of the law, we think that we can just do this with raised medians. Same thing for Pine Lake Road. There are raised medians out there. It's really a pretty nice new installation. I did mention here that the gate arms and cantilever bases, we need to just verify the distance those are back from the curb, and when we have the diagnostic meeting, make sure they're in the adequate position. And again, we may have to do some curb modifications. But again, this one's pretty much set up for quiet zone. The South 70th Street, now this one's going to be a little bit more difficult. There's enough room for raised medians, but we probably would need to widen the roadway. I believe it's like a 28-foot top, and there's no curb. And to have 2 travel lanes and a 4-foot raised median, you're probably going to need to be closer to 30 or 32 feet. So we would likely widen about center and put a median down the middle. I don't know if the city or county have any plans for the improvement of 70th Street. I'm not sure if there is any on file, but that might be something to just coordinate with the city on and make sure that there's not.
I haven't heard anything on our side. That
Yeah,
would indicate
we haven't
that,
either.
So.
The roundabout was just installed, so I would imagine that
Yep.
if any improvements were forthcoming, they would have been done then. So
Plus, new homes are coming in that area as well, and they've been coming in that area, so.
Sure. Okay. But it would be a fairly straightforward widening project. There'd have to be some grading and things, but, there's room to do it, so
So far, do you venture this one to be the most expensive of the group?
I'm sorry.
So far, is this the one that you expect to be the most expensive of the group?
Either there, I think 40th Street. 84th Street, again, this has been recently improved, and it's pretty much set up, and there might be some minor improvements here, but this one's pretty much set up for a quiet zone. And then Yankee Hill, one thing I'll mention here is if you look at the ADT, this is an old, very old count. It's obviously no longer 50 cars a day. But again, this one's pretty much set up. We'd have to go out there and look and get, approval by the diagnostic team. There may be some things that need to be moved around, but I think we would try to, work with the railroad and say, hey, everything is set up for this, and we're, meeting the intent of the quiet zone. So that was the end of my slides. I can pause for any questions, but I could talk about next steps if you'd like.
I think that'd be helpful, Mark. I mean, just because I know you're dealing with, the schedule's not determined solely by your office, and I think it's helpful to everybody to understand what you're working with here.
Yes. If it was determined by me, we might be done already.
Had that feeling, yeah.
Probably our next steps, first would be to finish up our concepts and our cost estimates. We're doing that in tandem and maybe Roger can talk to this, but I believe that the BNSF and RTSD are working on an agreement for cost sharing.
One of the requirements from the railroads these days is that they require the road authority to enter into a third-party agreement. We have to agree to pay them to have a consultant come to the diagnostic meeting on their behalf. And that agreement is being worked on by BNSF, but I have not yet been sent a draft, so that would need to come in, be reviewed. We don't know what that number would be. And then that agreement would have to be approved by the board, either by Rick, because he has authority to sign a small enough agreement. We could choose not to sign the agreement, and then they would simply indicate they won't come to the meeting, and if you don't have a meeting, you can't move ahead with quiet zone. So I don't think we have much of a choice. If we're going to continue to proceed, we need to get that agreement here, try to hope that it is a reasonable dollar amount and get that in place, and then with that in place, then FHU can start trying to go ahead and get that diagnostic meeting set up, which again needs FRA, Federal Rail, NDOT, both railroads. It will need the county engineer's office, the city engineer's office, as well as the RTSD is kind of facilitating this, but the road authorities. The county is involved because they own the north side of the 70th Street crossing, so they would be a party to that. So we're trying to move ahead, but it's difficult to say
It's just
exactly
a
when
lot
that
of
would be done.
folks. It's a lot of folks to get together at one time, and,
Yeah.
federal, state, private industry.
Right.
Of those, I'd say the BNSF is probably the most difficult to get scheduled. We've had pretty good responsiveness from the other agencies.
Okay. Yeah, Deb.
The presentation was very informative, thank you. It will be attached to the minutes, correct?
We can do that, yes. I did send those slides to all the board members this morning simply in an email. It was kind of last minute. I apologize for that, but we can attach them to minutes. We could also make them an attachment to the agenda on the board agenda for future so that other folks could look at it as well.
Whatever method's easiest, I just know that there are members of the public who are interested in the information.
Okay?
Makes sense. Good question.
And then I would just say, after that diagnostic review meeting, if the decision is made to move forward with any of the crossings, we would come back and revise our plans. And then I believe, if there were some improvements needed, I think Roger would come out and have another, I don't know if he'd be an RFP or whatnot, but something to get those design plans under contract with the designer.
Yes, certainly would need to do that. I think a couple of other things that we probably need to discuss once we've gotten the report. How do we share that report information with the public, making sure that the stakeholders are aware of what it would take to implement a quiet zone, what the recommendations are, what the costs are, whether there would be an open house. I'm guessing at some point there would need to be a public meeting, so we give people a chance to come in, sit down, go through the information, look at what's being proposed, and then at some point the board making a decision to move ahead or not move ahead.
Yeah, one thing as part of our report, we'll have cost estimates. So I don't have them today, but because we're not necessarily sure until we have that diagnostic meeting, but that'll be part of our deliverable.
Yeah, Deb had a question,
Sorry, one
and
more
I had
question.
one.
In the information that you were still gathering, when we, decide when and if and how and to what extent to move forward, will your study show the number of residences impacted by a regular horn and a wayside horn? I mean, kind of like you showed there before, could we see that for each crossing? I mean, I guess it would be important for me to know, do we have, 20 residences within, this area, or do we have 200? And is that something that we can expect to see?
The answer is yes,
Okay.
and we're actually working on that probably as we speak.
Okay,
Um,
great.
So we've got a GIS overlay that we're going to do. Actually, I can show you a picture here, maybe. How do I get to that spot, Roger? Here. Right here. Can you see that map?
Yes, sir.
So this is our online GIS platform that basically just is showing, each one of the crossings. It just as an example, the information is here, and then we've got our inventory information, and then if you click on it, you can see the photo of the crossing. But we would have our noise footprint over each one of these. Over each one of these crossings.
Okay.
So we'll have for all 12 that footprint, and we've got the ability to count how many residences and other things in there, so you can get an idea for that.
Jane?
Just to follow up with Deb's question, if you recommend a wayside horn, can BNSF come back and say, we don't think so? I mean, do they typically come back and say, we don't think your recommendation of a wayside horn is appropriate for this intersection? Have they done that? I mean, in the past because it seems like a wayside horn is so obviously impacts fewer people or residents.
Sure. With the way that the final rule is put together, it's a 1-to-1 replacement for the horn, the locomotive horn.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't believe that they can come back and tell you can't put it in, but you have to pay for it.
Right.
And there's an ongoing maintenance agreement that there would be with the railroad. So they don't necessarily make it easy to go through the process, but I don't believe that they can.
But otherwise, if you meet the guideline, you meet the guideline.
Correct.
Okay.
Well, I guess the question that leads to for me, Mark, is it the FRA is the final
Correct.
decision maker in this if the standards have been met? Or
Correct. Yes.
So, yeah, okay. There may be could be a lot of heavy discussions on that topic, but it'd be up to the FRA to say, yeah, it works, it meets our expectations.
Yes, as long as you as the road authority are providing the necessary minimum requirements to put in wayside horn or these other improvements, then the railroad has to go along with that.
Right.
And
Sure.
generally, you're right, the FRA is kind of the final word on that.
Okay.
There
And then,
is-
so, just so the time frame we're at is just indeterminate right now. We don't know when the diagnostic test will take place. And we'll, as you know more, Roger will know more. We'll keep everybody posted here. After that's done, then it's all back in your court again, and then you guys can manage, what the costs are, what the impacts are, and then we'll get that.
Yes. yeah, this first step is to get that agreement that Roger was talking about.
A first step towards, yeah, I got it.
There is an additional complication, and Mark is exactly correct. FRA is the final authority on whether the conditions have been met in the federal rule, the final Horn rule. The railroad can't object. They can raise certainly questions, but FRA rules. In this particular case, and unique again with Lancaster County, is the road authority has to agree as well. So, and I'm not suggesting one thing versus other. The Wayside Horn has been an operational challenge and difficulty at 35th and Adams. The city of Lincoln would have to agree, probably through an interlocal agreement with the RTSD, that if the RTSD was going to do a quiet zone and fund it, the city and Lancaster County have to accept that infrastructure that is built then to operate and to maintain. And I'm not saying they wouldn't, but they will have a say-so on whether they desire or hope to have the Wayside Horn as well.
So they could, in effect, veto waste, that, the road authority could, in effect, say no to waste.
Yeah, and I love playing
We might be
attorney.
going
When
too
the
far
city
into the
attorney's
weeds
not
here.
here, at that point, the city council may well have some latitude to ask LTU to do something that they don't necessarily recommend. I don't know that for a fact, and I wouldn't speak for them, but we'll try. The goal is we're partners, we all work together, we go a step at a time, and we don't catch anybody short at the very end saying, no, we won't do that, so, okay.
Any other
Okay.
questions for Mark while we have him here? Mark, thank you for
Thank
being
you.
here this morning. Appreciate all your efforts. We'll look forward to seeing you again in the future.
Yeah, thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you, Mark.
Roger, is there anything else?
James tells me he's in the parking lot,
Okay.
headed up, so we want to make best use of his time. I appreciate that. The one thing I guess I could do is item number 6, just report on the current budget status. You did have an attachment, and I can quickly say we're in pretty good shape on the budget. And
Move it. Thank you, James. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you, James. Try to go quickly here. Just very, very quickly, a correction. The budget sheet that's on the website shows the actual FY21's actual through 5/21 up in the operating expenses. There is an error down below in the construction projects. It says actuals through 2/19 and 2/9. That is incorrect. Those are also through 5/21. We did just pay off the second half of the superintendent, so that first item will be fully paid. We paid a small invoice to Crosby Gunzel. And we've made one payment down in the construction projects, one additional payment not shown out of the miscellaneous engineering, just under $10,000 to FHU for the work that they've done to this point. So I think to behoove time and respect James's time as well, we could go back to the beginning.
Back to item 3, approval of minutes, and
I move approval of the minutes.
Second.
okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes. And my understanding is we'll have 4 voting members here this morning.
Correct.
Without taking too much, James, Tom has not yet officially been appointed. That's why we didn't have a quorum. Roma was also unavailable today, so that is the controversy. So, any discussion on the minutes? Please call the roll.
Yes.
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 Yes, motion carries 4-0. Election of officers, item number 4.
Mr. Chair, I want to compliment the leadership of the officers in the past year. You stepped in at a challenging time as the trains were reactivated along Highway 2, and your railroad knowledge has been very helpful. And James Michael's experience and with the northeastern part of the city certainly has been helpful as we continue to move forward in 33rd and Cornhusker. And while I haven't seen her in action, I'm sure Roma's done an excellent job as secretary, signing the minutes by the very competent people we have assisting us. So can I make that a general motion for all three officers, or do you need it singularly? One? Okay. I will make a motion that we retain the officers for the coming fiscal year.
Second.
We have a motion and a second that the three officers that we currently have would stay in office for another year. Any discussion on that? I would just say thank you, Deb, for your kind words, and Jane for your encouragement and support. Please call the roll.
Yes.
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 Motion carries 4-0. We did receive item number 5 previously.
I will move that we accept the financial report as presented.
Second.
Okay, and the short version is that we have been saving up money in preparation of funding the significant project that's before us at 33rd and Cornhusker, that it dropped the last couple of years because of different issues, including the levy. I have, as I recall, $13 million that we are starting towards that project. Any further discussion on this topic? Please call the roll.
Yes.
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 Motion carries 4-0. And then item number 6, Roger?
I just did that. That's just a report. We're doing fine on the budget.
So report 5, we do approve. Report 6, we don't.
That's correct.
Okay, very good. We'll move on to item number 7.
Okay.
Consideration of the Rosa Parks Trail interlocal agreement.
Okay, and I'll start off. Paul Zillig is the general manager of the Lower Platte South NRD is here. This project, an undercrossing, and Paul will go through that, has been on the RTSD budget list for a number of years, a number of challenges getting there. And currently, in previous years, we had been budgeting $50,000 per year. That was what is proposed in next year's. The current interlocal agreement expires in September. So Paul had contacted me saying it looked like we needed to do an update on that. He is here today to re-advise us and the community what that project is, the importance, and some additional financial request. So Paul?
Good morning, everyone. On the screen is an aerial photo of the area we're talking about. It's called the Rosa Parks Trail. And if you'll notice, Rosa Parks Ways identified there, just north of that or above that is the Burlington Northern Tracks. That is out of the old humping station or whatever the proper name for that is now anyway. You can see Salt Creek on the left middle, and then there's a trail, the white narrow strips is the Salt Creek Levee Trail that extends up to the railroad tracks, and then it detours over to the right or to the east of First Street, and at that point you could go at grade over the tracks, or there is a undersized box culvert that you can't possibly ride a bike through, but it's maybe 3 foot wide, maybe 6 foot tall type underpass. So that's where that goes at this time. The project that was identified when we did the trail project over 10 years ago would be to do an underpass of the Burlington Northern Tracks at that location. Great idea, and we started working on that project. That was 10 years ago we started that. We were approved for federal funding in 2012, and then started through that process there with NDOT for that project. We came here 2016, RTSD entered into this interlocal agreement. The estimated cost back at that time was about $450-some thousand. You can imagine when we're dealing with a railroad, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, because there's a Salt Creek levee that's running through there, we had some additional add-ons as far as the expenditures that came up as we went through that. The agreement that we approved in 2016 was for 5 years, so we need to extend that. That will expire in September. And we don't expect to have the project done, even though we've already awarded a contract to have that work done, and the updated costs that I'll get into. The total cost right now is estimated to be $1.4 million, so it almost tripled in cost. Local share was $120,000. The NRD was paying $70,000. RTSD was going to pay $50,000. That's now $344,000. So there again, it's close to tripled. I guess as we look at reasons for the increased cost, obviously it's been 5 years ago, 6 years ago since we had that engineer's estimate. So things increased just for that reason. But then, as I said, the Salt Creek Levee Trail is there. So the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has the Salt Creek Levee that the NRD maintains. So there is some additional work trying to do additional measures to protect the levee system, retaining walls. There was a drainage structure we had to work around. And then the underpass itself, going underneath the railroad tracks, they have to basically build a structure to protect people that will be moving underneath the trail line. And there were additional costs there, along with railings and those type of things. So anyway, that's where we ended up now. So I'm coming back to you requesting that we extend, do an amendment to the interlocal agreement to extend it so we can get the project done. And obviously the NRD would appreciate any assistance, additional assistance we could get from RTSD for this project.
Okay. Thank you for being here, Paul. We may have questions for you,
Okay.
so don't go too far here. I think Roger's.
I simply was going to indicate that in your packet in the attachment was a draftsman by management folks, not our attorneys, and the intent of that attachment was the request was to have a 50-50 cost share in that extended local share. Whatever the board would choose to do, it's certainly your pleasure what you want to do. Currently, there's $50,000 in this year's budget, and we had proposed extending that to $50,000 for next year. An increase certainly doesn't break the bank completely for the RTSD. I think this is the kind of project that is good to continue to meet the mission of the RTSD of increased safety, reducing those conflicts between pedestrians and whatnot. It's an important link on that Salt Creek Levee Trail down through there. So, I certainly would support an increase. The agreement itself would need to have some rewriting done by the attorneys, but that point,
I'd just like, Paul, are we in position now where this prize, the first year I heard was 2012, so this is like a lot of projects has been around for a while. Are we in position now where we are going to go forward with this improvement? Do you see it actually happening?
Yes, NDOT has awarded a contract.
Okay.
So the contractor is in the process right now of constructing the structure for underneath, and then that will be completed this fall. So sometime this fall, it should be done.
Okay. Oh, okay. Very good. I know it sounds like a very worthwhile project, and we'd committed $50,000 in the past to support it. I know your costs have gone up. I think one figure I heard was adding another an additional $50,000 to our previous $50,000 to help support the project. Any other thoughts, comments, questions?
Well, just for the record, the original partnership was 60-40, and now we're going to 50-50 plus 3 times the original amount. So we would be at $172,000, where if we were still under the original 60-40 match, it'd be $137,000. So we're going from 50,000 up to 172. That's a pretty big jump.
Yeah, we've got a lot of competing priorities right now, as we've discussed already. But anyone else have any questions or thoughts for Paul?
I guess this amendment is for 7 years, correct? An additional 7 years? Is that what it?
That's what I didn't want to come back again.
Okay, that's okay, that's okay. But it
We
seems
don't.
like the 50/50 is between NRD and RTSD. But isn't it, it's not, it should be 344,000, right?
Well, 344,000 is the estimated local cost. And in my discussion with Roger was initially the thought was 50/50. By the time the interlocal agreement was done, it was up to 70,000 and 50,000. So, that was kind of a, I don't know that we ever had an agreement that said 50/50. But, so that got into the first draft that I had my attorney just put in there and then bring it here, and now we're having some good discussion on it, so.
Okay.
I think Paul's told you that their project is moving ahead. They're committed and they're going to do it. The RTSD has a certain amount of money. I think this board has complete freedom to choose anything from 0 to 50 on up to the 50%. So,
Paul, if we were unable, for whatever reason, to provide that additional 35,000, would that hold up the project? 35,000, I'm sorry, is the difference between the 172 that we're doing under the 50/50 plan and the 137 that we're doing under the 60/40.
Well, we're going to proceed on. I mean, we need to get the thing done. It's taken a long time to get to this point, so we're going to go ahead. Any support this group can give us as far as what you've already committed and additional would be appreciated.
Okay, so it's just on us to decide, as Roger said. At this point, we have no commitment, it sounds like, because of the
Well-
expiring agreement, but
I suppose technically they could send us an invoice before the end of the month, and our current interlocal agreement would say we've agreed to pay 50,000. If that invoice and the documentation got here, we're
we do
we're
want,
committed
and I
to
think
that.
we do want to
And-
support it.
Right,
Yeah,
That's-
RTSD's never backed out on an interlocal agreement with its partners that I'm aware of.
We just need to make a decision as a board, what number we're comfortable with from our available funding. We could do,
Any brave enough
we
to
do
make a
thumbs
motion?
up sometimes at board meetings. We do thumbs up for 50, thumbs up for 100, thumbs up for another number. What would the other number be? That's kind of, I think, what's before us.
Oh, I'll throw it out there that we stay with the 60/40 in the original agreement.
Which would be, do you have a number on that, Deb?
That would be 137,000. And that way, if you bill for the 50 in this calendar year, and then we're only being hit with the other 67,000 in the following year.
Okay, good thinking.
But if there's the interest in the board of going 50/50, I can live with that too. So,
Well, the way I read it is 50/50 of the total costs.
Well, it's 50/50 of the total local costs. It's not 50/50 of the total project costs. And again, that agreement hasn't been
Lapsed.
reviewed.
It lapses in September.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're reading the existing, but that was intended to be, somewhere in there, there's got to be language that the 50,000 was a cost of the local share. And that's a maximum, so that was not a percentage. It started off kind of 50/50, then as Deb said, 60/40. The board last year approved, or when we last approved that agreement, approved an agreement contributing 50,000.
So Deb, I don't know if you made a motion or not.
She did make a motion.
And
I think.
but was it seconded?
no.
No.
Okay.
So,
I guess I would say, because of how the costs have tripled, I think it would be a little bit fair just to say 50/50 of the additional cost, because just say,
And that figure is
That would be-
170?
172.
It's 172 plus or minus.
but we would pay the 50,000 this fiscal year.
We would go from our 50,000 commitment to 172,000 commitment.
Okay.
So then we'd be billed 112,000. But I get, well,
Assuming we could get the invoice in before the end of this month, correct?
That
then-
would just do the 50,
Yeah.
wouldn't it? Is that what you're-
Could we do that? Could we
What
spread
was-
it out over 3 years? I mean, considering the rate at which this project is moving?
Well,
50 this year, 50 next year?
Well,
I'll,
Sure.
No, I get what you're saying, because, I mean, originally, we committed to the
We're-
50% at a certain figure. We don't know why, I don't know why it was delayed, and I'm not trying to,
I'm sure the district's two attorneys can put the wording in to whatever, if we understand your intent and your desire.
Not to exceed us, I think Deb said 172,000. Is that what you said?
Deb said
50-50 would be-
137.
I'll
but-
pull my motion for 60-40. You guys are feeling generous. We'll go 50-50.
Well, nobody's voted on it. Nobody's agreed to
Nobody's second- yeah,
anything
nobody's
yet.
seconded anything.
I was the one at 100,000 here. I'm the Grinch, but. So I was stretched at 137. I thought that was generous, because that was the 60-40.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have a problem at 137.
And I think, while they're discussing, we probably could make a motion that we pay the agreed-upon amount of 50,000 by the end of this month. Is that per the original?
Appropriate invoice.
What do you suggest,
Okay.
Roger?
How does that work, right? Can we make an agreement to pay our $50,000 commitment?
I think you can make a motion to say it's the intent of the board to contribute the 50,000 from this year to write. And maybe I need Bill to come up here. I think the intent is you're approving an extension or a revised interlocal agreement in which the intent is to pay out the current 50 and pay out the rest the next year, or did you say over 2 years?
Well,
Let's just
yeah,
do
I
one.
mean, how quick do you think it's going to move now?
He said done by
It'll-
September.
Done this fall.
Done this fall.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so
I
we could,
heard September, sorry.
we could get part of it in 2 fiscal years.
And the remainder would be paid out of next year's budget, and I would ask, and I think our attorney would suggest that we'd put an upper limit on that it would be 50, and then 122 for a maximum of 172. And if the costs go over that, the NRD picks that up. And you'd be authorizing the board chair to sign that revised, amended, extended agreement, provided that it meets review and form by the NRD attorney, the RTSD attorney, and is recommended by the RTSD director.
So moved.
Second.
Yowzers.
All right, then. We have a motion and a second to approve all those things that Roger said about 50,000 this year, and with
112.
an appropriate agreement in place to add 112,000 to that. in support-
122,
122.
122,
for a
thank you.
total of
Not-
172.
I
Yeah,
knew
one-
Deb's math was off
Yeah,
there, but
you're right,
I just
122.
said, whatever you
Yeah,
said,
my-
Deb, I'm
yeah.
going to repeat.
Including the
My
approval
cell
of
phone and
the,
my scribbles on this piece of paper.
So we would
I am proud
then
of it.
add the 122 to it with the appropriate agreement in support of this project. That will
Including-
be completed this fall.
including the amended interlocal agreement.
Yeah, well, that would be the work of the attorneys getting us that. And that could be signed by the board chair if all those are met.
All those conditions are met, yes.
Yeah. Any further discussion on this item? Mary, please call the roll. Yes.
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 Motion carries 4-0. Paul, thank you for being with us this morning.
Thank you, Paul.
Okay, trying to respect James' time, I think he still has some other things that need to get done. I think we are now back to
Item 8.
item 8, consideration of the 21-22 budget.
Which we just changed.
Which I will speak to. I have called up on the attachment on the website, and with that, again, as I said in March, a fairly Spartan budget. The operating budget stays pretty much the same as I explained back then. The 21 budget was 220. We're proposing the 229. It went up 700. The only projects that we're really projecting in the CIP is the continuation of 33rd and Cornhusker. We've kept $100,000 in for miscellaneous engineering and emergency and safety, of which the current Southeast Lincoln Quiet Zone is being funded out of the miscellaneous engineering. And we would need to amend the Salt Creek underpass west of J, which is really Rosa Parks. The current draft budget you have there says 50,000. That would need to be amended to 122,000. Add 72 to the total. Otherwise, again, this budget is a Spartan budget trying, as Dennis said, to restore the levy, put money, continue to build up the cash. The RTSD is paid as it goes, and the money needs to be in the bank. Right now, 33rd and Cornhusker has been the priority project, so.
And Roger, maybe I missed it. Where did you move the 72,000 from?
It's down there under the Salt Creek Railroad underpass west of J. That's actually the location where the underpass is, and I will get that corrected to call that the Rosa Parks trail, so it's
Okay.
less confusing.
Well,
So-
we're adding 72,000 to that project. What are we taking 72,000 away from?
We aren't, actually,
That's good.
we
If you can
don't,
do that.
you don't have to do that because there's enough cash in the bank. All we're really doing is there's going to be $72,000 less in the bank in cash
Okay.
for next year. But it doesn't, it doesn't affect the levy, it doesn't affect the revenues.
Fair enough.
Okay.
Any questions on this, Deb?
The continuing work by FHU, that comes out of miscellaneous engineering?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions about this item?
Oh, just one last question.
Yep.
This is based on the restoration of the full mill levy, or the levy, RTSD levy by the county board?
No, not completely, and that's the next item on the agenda. I mean, this budget is supported by the revenue coming in, but I am
Right.
going to be making a recommendation based on information from the county board on the request for the levy. That'd be a separate action after the budget's approved.
So then this would be revised again?
No, the revenue.
Oh,
Expenditures don't
This is
change.
expenditures, okay.
This is all expenditures,
Gotcha.
Okay.
and the revenue
Good
then would be
clarification.
affected by the levy.
Okay.
And the funding that we're in
Right.
preparation would change. Very good. I'd entertain a motion on item 8.
I'll move approval of the fiscal year 2021-2022 budget and CIP
As amended.
as amended,
Okay.
with the additional amount for the Rosa Parkway project.
Yeah.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the budget with the described amendment. Any discussion? Please call the roll, Mary.
Yes.
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 Yes, motion carries 4-0. Item 9.
Okay, just very quickly, I think that the county board has been very open in its discussion and its commitment to try to restore and return the RTSD back closer to the levy, certainly to the levy that it was 2 years ago. We're currently at 1.7717, and my recommendation, and I think the county board will be positive in trying to restore it back to a 2.2217. And then while you're not you're voting today to request that levy, and that's my recommendation to you. But it also comes with, this is just an annual thing, but the intent would be we get back to 2.2217 this year, and then over the next 2 years, try to get on back to the 2.6, because we really need to be at 2.6 to have a better opportunity and reasonableness to fund 33rd and Cornhusker. We need the full levy. So, and I think the county board has continued to say that's their goal, is to get the RTSD back. So my recommendation, and what I think the county board would be able to support, is a levy request of 2.2217.
Okay. Any comments, questions, motions?
Be nice if the motion would come from one of the city representatives.
And so just for clarification, this is just for one fiscal year
Yes.
with the understanding that the county board will hopefully restore it to 2.6 in fiscal year 2022 to 2023?
I
If
think-
that's 2 years. In my conversations, the goal is to take smaller bites. And if we got back to 2.22, maybe it goes back to 2.45 or 2.5 and then to 2.6 the following year. There is no guarantee, but this is your request to the board, and I think you're operating off in good faith that that's the intent of the county board over time to get there.
Yeah, we're just, as this board, we're making our desires known to the county board. They are still 5 folks there who have to make the final call.
Yes.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to request that the county board raise the levy to the previous level of 2.22 something.
2.2217.
Yes.
Good,
And
you're
just for
really
the
good at math,
record,
but
we
you're-
are where right now, 2 point?
We're
1.7,
7.
well, yeah, we're 3/4 of a cent below that, 1.4717. 1.4717 is where we are.
Okay,
Okay?
we have a motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Yes.
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 Motion carries 4-0. Item number 10, Lid Authority.
Okay, and again, this is primarily for the public that listens in to make sure there isn't any misunderstanding about increasing budgets. A reminder that LB 989, passed in 1989, placed a lid on a number of restricted funds of government entities. But there are some provisions for those to increases, 2.5% basically on growth, real growth, and there is a provision in there that said you can also increase the potential increase of a budget 1% if approved by 3/4 majority vote of the governing body to use that 1%. And what I would want to make clear for everybody that's listening is if you vote to include that additional 1%, you haven't increased the budget. You have increased the potential in the future. If you came back and needed it, you'd have to vote again to increase that budget, that additional 1%. So this is a safety valve for the future, unknown things that come up. It's not a budget increase at this point. This has been fairly routine and historic that both city council, city and county have approved that 1% over the years. So I would recommend to you that you do that, and it does take 3/4 majority vote.
Okay,
I move approval of the additional 1% lid authority.
Second.
we have a motion and a second to approve the 1% additional Lid Authority. Any questions?
This became a huge discussion about your base when we were talking with the legislature about certain bills and lowering levies or putting max or caps on. So it seems fairly routine, but it could really be a benefit in the future to us.
Very helpful. Thank you, Deb. Please call the roll, Mary.
Yes.
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 Motion carries 4-0. I think we've covered 11 in depth. Number 12?
Well,
No.
Do we
If-
have
if I might,
we don't have 3/4, do we?
yes.
Yes, you only have 5 current voting members of the
I
RTSD.
think it's 3/4 of the sitting, of the
Of the
voting members
people-
during the
people who
meeting.
are
Okay.
attending.
So we should
So
be
we had
okay.
100%, Jane. I can do that.
100%.
I know the city got tripped up on that, whether it's the actual members, sitting members, or, so.
Mr. President, if I could perhaps stop again at 11B in the interest for the Southeast Lincoln Quiet Zone, in the interest that we make sure we're trying to make good progress. I would ask for the consideration of a motion that the board would approve the president signing a third-party engineering agreement with BNSF based on approval of form by the RTSD attorney and an approval recommendation from the executive director of the RTSD. That way we wouldn't have to come back to move that quiet zone study and the diagnostic meeting ahead.
I move approval of the third-party agreement for the diagnostic that will be needed to continue with the Southeast Lincoln Quiet Zone Study.
Okay.
Did I state that correctly?
I will second that.
We have a motion and a second to approve the signing of an agreement with the third party for the diagnostic study, approval for the president to sign. Please call the roll. Yes.
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 Motion carries 4-0. Item number 12.
Just going to say communications and correspondence have significantly reduced with the board's action authorizing the high-level quiet zone study in March. Many folks were very appreciative. We got those emails, but the number of communications, written, telephone, have dropped off to just 1 or 2 a month. They picked up a little again this week, wanting to remind everybody, boy, we hope the RTSD is moving ahead. I will respond back to those as to the action and the update today. I'm sure many of them may be frustrated with that time delay, but we'll continue to try to move ahead on that as quickly as we can.
And for the record, I also heard the trains last night.
Yes.
8:25 this morning was the next one.
8:25.
And I would have to say, just for transparency, I have also received a couple calls from folks that like the train horns, so there's always two sides to both stories.
I heard from that person too.
Well, no, I'm telling you, there are people at pickleball who say, don't be spending millions of tax dollars.
We're not going to be
on
spending
train
millions
horns."
of taxpayer
I
dollars.
realize.
The other thing, we did receive a couple letters from ProRail Nebraska and their representatives talking just about the potential of other freight along Highway 2. I can share those letters with the board at another time in a communication or make them available. The other thing that I want to let you know, it really has to do with item 11, crossing updates. The county engineer's office had expressed a concern about the condition of 2 significant undercrossings under BNSF at Southwest 112th and Southwest 140th Street. Last week, members of the BNSF Railroad, Lancaster County Engineer's Office, and the RTSD met out there to do investigations of those structures. There are some concerns. The railroad has committed that they will be, they took pictures, they're documenting the issues, and plan to submit that to the BNSF Concrete Restoration Program. Now, before you say, oh yay, I mean, it could take a year for those kind of projects and programs to move ahead, but in the interim, they plan to address in the next couple of weeks issues at Southwest 140th. There is some ballast falling off, and there is some indication of some additional delamination, destruction of concrete that could fall at that structure, and they're going to do some temporary measures over the next couple of weeks to protect that while they're waiting for the restoration project. So RTSD was able to assist with that, and I'll try to kind of stay on top of things with the county engineer's office to make sure they get done.
Thank you for addressing that. We appreciate your efforts there. That's important. Item number 13, non-agenda.
I just was, Roger, before you walk away, do you want to just speak briefly about the connection dedication yesterday?
Saturday.
Yes, Saturday afternoon at 3 o'clock, there was a dedication service for the Jamaica Trails Bridge, and I will totally have forgotten it. The bridge itself is named after the Great Plains Trails Organization, who is a tremendous, responsible organization in this community that has made so many projects available, and we're able to accomplish them. I'm proud of all of you and this organization to say the RTSD was a significant contributor to the tune of $900,000 to that project, another project that had gone from a little over $1 million to more than $2 million by the time they got done. But the project turned out well. The contractor did well. The consultant did well. Parks Department, all of the stakeholders and the trail users. So it was a great afternoon, and it was fun to do that, and what a great connection. Deb has her own personal story about why that bridge is important. She came and spoke and represented the board, and I appreciated her doing that. So another evidence of the good work that this RTSD is able to do for this community that sometimes we take for granted. But just the bridges, the trails, the crossings, the support this organization can do is par none. So anyway.
Good. Anything you'd want to add, Deb?
No, if you go out there, Olson and Associates was the engineering firm, and then K2 did the actual work. And if you go out there, you will see they're 80-pound bags that support the structure on both sides and had to be hand laid. I bet there's hundreds and hundreds of them. So the K2 contractor said that his employees really appreciated that opportunity to haul those 80-pound bags up that hill, back and forth. So take note
exercise.
when you're out there. So
Very nice. Thank you for that. All right, then, item 13, non-agenda items, public comments. Is there anyone here from the public who'd like to speak on a non-agenda item today? Seeing none, do we need one?
I will move we adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. Please call the roll.
Yes.
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 Thank you, James.
Yes, we are adjourned.
Under your
We are
belt.
adjourned.